Hello and welcome to Third Sector TV. In today's video, we're going to be exploring the key risks faced by charities today. Earlier, I spoke to Ruth Campbell, who is the founder of Serenity Cafe, a small charity based in Edinburgh, to ask her what the main risks were that she faces. So Ruth, could you tell us a little bit about what COMAS is and also a little bit about Serenity Cafe itself?
Okay, well, COMAS is a small-scale charity. We operate as a social enterprise, and one of our major projects is the Serenity Cafe, which is an initiative that involves people in recovery from addiction in helping to develop their community. At the moment, it's a virtual cafe with a range of social activities and opportunities for people to develop themselves when they leave treatment after recovery from addiction.
And to dig a little bit deeper into this, given your experience with Serenity Cafe over the last couple of years, what are the main issues that you have experienced from a risk perspective?
I think as a small new start organisation, we had no initial funding. So for the first year, actually everything was a risk. Could we survive? Could we make the model work? As things developed in our first and our second year, we became more confident, but we also became much more ambitious about what we wanted to achieve for our beneficiaries. And the financial model that we were using, there was that basically we would earn income. Public sector and other voluntary organisations would commission us to provide services to them, and we would then use that surplus income to develop projects. And at the same time, over a period of time, try and build up our grant income to support those projects directly. So the risks were always around cash flow, around trying to develop a good track record, ensure that we deliver well on grants, but also at the same time to be ambitious for what we could achieve for the people that we set out to help.
Given that you work with so many volunteers, how does the risk profile differ when, say, you've got a permanent member of staff versus someone who volunteers for an hour on a Sunday?
Well, of course, one of the risks in an organisation like ours is that we don't actually have permanent members of staff because our income profile doesn't really allow for that. We've got a small dedicated team of part-time workers who are relatively experienced, although we do take on some people as interns and apprentices. Our volunteer base is challenging at times because the people who volunteer with us are members of the recovery community. They're people with experience of addiction themselves who want to give their time to help other people who are also recovering from addiction. So there can be volunteers who need a high level of support, who sometimes have their own mental health issues, struggle with their own recovery. We're constantly monitoring how well our volunteers are doing, as well as also what they're capable of. And I think it is very difficult from a delivery point of view to try and work out what we can deliver with volunteers, what we need paid staff to support and to directly get involved in, and also how we provide that backup support for people who are essentially working with a very vulnerable client group.
And just to drill a little bit deeper into that, what do you see as being due diligence from a charity perspective when it comes to background checking your volunteers?
I'll be perfectly honest, when you're working with people who are recovering from addiction, it's actually very rare that you work with anybody who doesn't have a criminal record. That's the nature of recovery, is that people are changing their lives. So I think that getting hung up on disclosure checking and people's backgrounds, I think would be a non-starter for us. I think it's what makes us unique, but it also clearly means that what we're doing in terms of managing risk is important to consider carefully. It would be wrong of us to put volunteers into a position where their backgrounds were being called into question, but at the same time it would be wrong of us to be trying to do what we're doing without respecting that people in recovery from addiction have a contribution to make. So it's a difficult balancing act for us.
Currently, you mentioned that you're operating as a virtual cafe. Is that a situation that's going to continue, or are you looking to find more fixed premises?
As an organisation, we're constantly facing transitions, and one of the transitions we're making just now is to move this virtual cafe concept into 7-day-a-week premises. It's been the ambition all along, but the timing after 2.5 years now is right for us to move into permanent premises. We've secured a small amount of funding for that, and I think the challenges for us are how do we make that small amount of money go as far as we can. Premises are expensive. The kinds of premises we can afford are badly in need of refurbishment. If we are tenants, how will we fund that? There's so much to think about, and this is a first move for us. Like so many things as a new organisation, you're doing a lot of things for the first time, trying to draw on the right level of professional experience in terms of construction, negotiating leases, but at the same time keeping our heads screwed on about what we can realistically manage as a small organisation.
With regard to finding new premises, there can often be a bit of a balancing act between finding the most affordable place, but also balancing that out with the risk that something might go wrong within said premises. How do you go about getting that balance right?
I think truthfully you just have to keep weighing things up. I don't think there's any easy answers for small organisations like ours, or for even larger organisations in the sector. We use our board members well in terms of their ability to ask questions, to lay out the strategic options, but ultimately we have to make a decision. We're funded to basically take this project forward. If we don't deliver, that in itself is a risk, and at the same time we've developed a lot of enthusiasm, commitment and energy for this idea from the recovery community. We risk letting people down if we don't go forward. So I think that if we were terribly risk averse, we wouldn't succeed in this project. At the same time, we've got to be risk savvy, if you like. We've got to be very, very clear about what kinds of decisions we need to make at the right time in order to go forward.
Looking specifically at the area of fundraising, charities are getting more creative here, but how can they ensure that they tick the creative box without ushering in unacceptable levels of risk?
I think as a small organisation, we can't hope to compete with some of the larger organisations' fundraising methods. What we do on a small scale locally will have to be unusual, eye-catching. It'll have to involve people in different ways. So I do think that if we're going to go ahead at all, we are going to have to try and do things that push the boundaries a little bit. I think the thing for us is to ask questions from people who've done this before, use the experience of other organisations, and I suppose be cautious, know when to stop, but also know when to have a go at things, really.
So Ruth, given that Serenity Cafe is going through an exciting period of change, how do you go about getting a handle on the actual level of risk that you're exposed to? So how can you grow your charity in the right way whilst ensuring that you're able to sleep at night?
Yeah, sleeping at night's a really attractive option right now, I can tell you. You don't start small organisations from scratch and think you're going to get a lot of sleep. But I think seriously, it's like most organisations, we do the strategic thinking, we undertake exercises with our board, with our volunteers, with our staff, we do risk mapping. I think the important thing for an organisation that's small and growing is to constantly revise where things are at. Your strategy and your risk mapping cannot be something that sits on the shelf. It has to be something that's a live document that you're constantly revisiting and making sure that you have thought everything through. We know what the major critical risks are, and we know what we'll do if those occur. But at the same time, we also I think derive some level of comfort from knowing what the remote and low impact risks are as well. So having it all mapped out actually is an important exercise for us.
That was Ruth Campbell, founder of Serenity Cafe, talking to me earlier today. I'm now fortunate to be joined live in the studio by Anne Hudson, who is Business Development Manager for Markel UK. So Anne, from a risk perspective, what is the main trap that charities fall into?
Right, yes. Well, what we tend to find is that charities concentrate on the tangibles, the buildings, the contents, things that can be seen and picked up and moved around. So they think about the insurance in terms of damage that might be done to them, the physical hazards of fire and storm, and then of course theft. What tends to be overlooked are the management risks. These are public liability, professional indemnity, and trustee indemnity. What we mean as insurers by this is where you might, through an incorrect decision, be held liable for any negligence that is alleged against you, and potentially people may be financially disadvantaged by decisions you make. Also, if you're giving advice, somebody may act on that advice and things go wrong. They may hold you responsible for the consequent actions. So these are areas that charities need to be very careful to make sure they have adequate insurance protection.
Now, Anne, a big area when it comes to risk is fundraising. What are the key things that charities should be thinking about here?
Well, fundraising for all charities is crucial. It's a big way of generating income. So to look at fundraising, you need to think, well, what are we going to do ourselves? What have we got the experience and expertise to manage on our own right? And where do we need help? Typically, charities look for the more spectacular, the new, the novel ways of raising income. These tend to produce risks. If you haven't done something before, you're not necessarily aware of all the pitfalls. So go to an expert. There are lots of companies who specialise in expert fundraising events. The spectacular things, ranging from balloon rides and skydiving to trekking up the Himalayas. Use an expert. They will have their own insurance arranged, and you can concentrate on your day-to-day activities, which you already have insurance for.
Now, Anne, earlier Ruth was talking about the need to look for new premises for Serenity Cafe, something that a lot of charities are in the process of doing. What kind of issues does this usher in from a risk perspective?
When you think of the buildings, whether you own and purchase outright, you'll need property owner's liability. Or then if you go and look at leasing or renting, you will still have an insurance element that you'll need to look at to either insure the building to bring it back up to the standard when you first got it, so that's a full repairing lease, you need insurance for that, or any tenants' improvements. When you take a building on, you may well add to it or change it for your own purposes, and you'll need to insure that element. If you then are going to look at hiring your premises to generate additional income, you need to have hirers insurance, so protect your indemnity to hirers if they have any problems while they're on your premises.
There's a lot of change going on in the charity landscape currently. What are the main trends that you're noticing at the moment?
One of the characteristics is an increased interest in commissioning for new services. There have been a lot of primary care trusts and lots of other local authority contracts that have been put out to tender. And charities are saying, well, this gives an opportunity to demonstrate our skills and use them to the maximum advantage, which is great. However, if you haven't had a lot of expertise in commissioning for services, you need to think very carefully about your due diligence process. This is looking in detail at the contract before you take it on and understanding not only what the local authority or primary care trust or any other body is looking to achieve, also looking very carefully at what you may inherit from previous activities and looking at how you're going to align your resources. All too often, allegations of negligence come forward after the event by people who say that the service has deteriorated in some way or another because you hadn't got all the facts at the time. Now, it's your responsibility as a charity to make sure that you unearth all things that are relevant to address that particular commissioning contract. There are other aspects of this too. A lot of charities are engaging with commissioning for services where you inherit the employees of a previous organiser or contract holder. This could be for cleaning services, it could be for provision of care, it could be for a host of different activities. Those employees, when they're transferred to you as the new charity provider for that commissioning service, will be expecting and entitled to the same terms and conditions as they had before.
It seems that charities are facing quite an evolving landscape of threats currently. So from an insurance company perspective, how do you go about keeping up?
Lots of research is a very short answer. We keep tabs on what the Charity Commission are doing, legislation. We have contacts within lots of the different charity environments. Our own 20-year experience comes to play because we use the experience we've had of underwriting and paying claims to help shape the products that we produce in the future. We also make sure that we get customer feedback and feedback from our insurance brokers. So we use that experience to create insurance products for paying claims and also to make sure we're there for the day-to-day.
Thank you very much, Anne. Some very good points there. Thank you very much to you for watching this edition of Third Sector TV. If you've got any questions on the many points raised, there will be a sheet available for you to download by following the instructions on your screen. Thanks for watching, and hopefully see you next time in the Third Sector TV studio.